forgot I was supposed to click the record on it. Secretary is Laura Glockner from Kansas Board of Cosmetology. This is her. Treasurer, Labrina Haslip from Kansas Disability Determination Center Service. That's kind of hard to say. And then I actually have 5 more members now. Cool. I have Jesse Becker from the Kansas Sentencing Commission. And like I said, Janine Browning is from the Department of Revenue. So these are your new board members. The new volunteers, victims, whatever you want to call them. And we asked for a survey of what you would like to see at ASTRA meetings, and they are looking at those suggestions, and you will probably be seeing them in upcoming meetings. So if you have anything, those are the people to see now. And yeah, I'll make Janine come up later just because. So the other thing that I would like y'all to do is make sure your phones are on mute or vibrate. Those of you on the phone or on remoting in, please do not put us on hold. If you have to take a call, hang up and call back in later. If you put us on hold, then we get this annoying beeping. And one of the advantages that I forgot to mention from working here is that we are actually doing a recording of this meeting, so we will be able to post it on the ASTRA website. We tried this with the SMART training, but we didn't do too good of a job. I heard that the video, or we had a really nice recording of lunch. So I have got notes to start it and stop it, so hopefully I remember to do that because I've already sort of forgot. So I think that's all I have. That's all my little notes say. And I'm going to bring up Director Sean Sullivan, the Division of Budget.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate your leadership on the board. I actually have probably 100 handouts for one thing I'm going to talk about. I don't know if that's enough or not, but while I'm talking, you can distribute those, and I didn't think about those that aren't here in the meeting, so I'll email that to Jan, and she can either put it on the website or email it to those that aren't able to be here or on the phone or listen to the presentation when they put it on the website. So just 3 things I want to talk about briefly. First is kind of where we are with the state revenue situation. Number 2, talk about the budget and how that relates to the revenue. And then 3, talk about the timeline, and I need one of those. All yours. So I'm going to talk about it. Third, to talk about new performance-based budgeting system and some things that we're going to be moving forward with the next budget submission. So first, with the revenue situation, I'm sure you all read the newspaper and know where we are, but we will update our revenue projections on April 20th, which is our biannual revenue estimating process, which there are 6 groups that are a part of. So the next one will be on April 20th here in about a week and a half or 2. We did our last update in early November, and so we've had 5 revenue months since then: November, December, January, February, and March. From those 5 months, we have been $81.2 million below the projections, and that's noteworthy because what we set for the revenue in the November revenue estimating process is what the budget was based on which the legislature passed a budget and the governor signed. So there's a couple of points of concern with the revenue. It's not kind of how it's been the last year and a half or 2, where we've just been missing or been less than what the projections have been for what's been set. Now the case is that we are less than where we were even a year ago, year to date. So for an instance or example, for our individual income tax source, which is about 40% of our revenue that we get in Kansas, we're $56 million below the estimates that we set or projection we set in November, $56 million below, and we're $5 million below where we were a year ago or in March of 2015. So it's not even more that we're just missing the estimates. It's also now that we are below where we were a year ago. The second major tax category is our sales tax. Also, about 40% of every dollar that we have come in is from sales tax. We're about $21 million below the projection we set in November. We're above where we were a year ago, but that's only because of the sales tax increase from 615 to 65 that occurred July of last year. But when you take out the rate increase, what we're experiencing is a negative 0.5% growth compared to last year, or lack of growth. So traditionally for sales tax, we have between a 4 and 5% growth a year compared to the previous year. And what we're experiencing now is a negative growth. With our corporate tax, which is about 8-9% of every dollar that we have coming in, we're $26 million below where we were the previous March of 2015. And with our severance tax, which is our oil and gas receipts, we're $59 million less than we were a year ago of March of 2015. So those are the four major ones. Really, each of the four are below where they were a year ago. So total, we're 81.2 behind. So where does that leave us with the budget? It's kind of the next quick thing. The budget that the legislature passed, that the governor signed, had an ending balance of $32 million. So you include a fiscal year-to-date shortfall of 81, and that puts us about $50 million below zero with that budget that was passed. Also in that budget bill, it did have what's called special allotment authority, which means that whenever, with the qualifications that was included in the language, was that whenever the budget is projected to be below $100 million state general fund, which it certainly is this year or next, the governor has the ability to go and to make targeted allotments instead of across-the-board allotments, with the exclusions that he can't do that to the legislature, judiciary, or debt service payments. And they also said in the bill that he signed that if CAPERS is used as a tool to balance the budget this year, that has to be paid back during the first quarter of next year in fiscal year 2017. So we're already about $50 million below. With that, after the March revenue numbers were announced, the governor also announced a 3% reduction to higher ed, to the universities, which was $17 million of savings, so that puts us around $33 million below zero. So the next steps are that revenue will be updated on April 20th, and then shortly thereafter, the governor or I will present our plans for the legislature to consider for both this year and next for balancing the budget, either for things that will require legislative action or things the governor can do through his special allotment authority. All right. We're getting feedback, I think, from people that are on the phone, so if you make sure you have your phone muted, that would be very much appreciated. So next I want to cover for the rest of my time is the one front and back page handout that you all have, or hopefully have, or you will have sent to you. The legislature is considering passing a bill, and actually it already passed the House, on performance-based budgeting that has a timeline to it with a couple different milestones. I would anticipate that this will pass the Senate in the first week or two when they get back from their break for the veto session, and they get back on April 27th. So it'll have to pass the Senate, and if there's any differences in the bill from the House version, then they'd have to go to conference committee and settle those, and then vote again on both sides. But this is based on an Alvarez and Marshall, or A&M recommendation, as we call it, from the efficiency report that was outlined in January and February. If you look at the timeline that has on the first page of the handout, with the heading Timeline to Implement Performance-Based Budgeting in Kansas, there's kind of two sets of timelines of this. There's a more detailed timeline that's on the top that has the more specific dates on it from April 1st of this year all the way to January 1st of 2019. And then if you look at the bottom of the handout, there's actually what's in the piece of legislation as it is now, with 3 milestones that are pretty flexible. So those 3 milestones that are in the legislation are first on deadline is January 9th of 2017, that the governor submit a budget with program information. The second is that by January of 2018, the governor submit a budget with program budgeting. And then the third and final step is by January of 2019, the governor submits a budget with program budgeting and performance measures. So what exactly does that mean? Some of that detail is outlined on the more detailed timeline on the middle of the page. This is all based on what some other states and municipalities have done with performance-based budgeting, and that a group called Pew MacArthur Foundation has assisted other states with, and that has assisted our own Department of Corrections with juvenile justice reform and budgeting over the last couple of years. So this is based on a initiative called Results First Initiative, which actually I'll send that to Jan as well to send out. There are 4 steps to that Results First Initiative. The first is to do a program-based inventory, and that is really the first step on this timeline that we have set to have completed by July 1st of 2016. And this may or may not be different than the different programs and sub-programs that we have built in our IBARS budget system or that's in the SMART system. But those will have to be guidelines that we develop here over the next few weeks. The second step within the Results First Initiative is to take those program inventories within each agency and then compare those to a national clearinghouse or database that Pew has that they have developed after working with 20 different states. This is not an all-encompassing clearinghouse. It really involves just welfare, social services, juvenile justice, substance abuse, mental health, Medicaid, some K-12 measures. Does not include a lot of the work that our fee-funded boards and commissions do, transportation, ag, natural resources, those kind of things. Those are things that we have to develop on our own. But what the second step is taking those program measures that agencies build or develop and then comparing those programs to the National Clearinghouse and database they have built into Pew, and then coming back with each program and saying this program has evidence-based program measures to it. It has a national-based, evidence-based program throughout the country and works. Or number 2, it is a promising practice that's been noted in other states. Or 3, it's a program that's not supported by really evidence or promising practices. The third step is to then do a benefit cost analysis of each program based on that data, clearinghouse, and program measures. And the fourth is to develop performance information or performance metrics or outcomes based on those things. So those are a 4-step kind of results first initiative based on Pew MacArthur Foundation work that we're going to work towards here. And again, I'll submit that or send that out to Jan to submit out for broader dissemination. Really the first step in this timeline is for agencies to develop program measures or to look at what you have now and determine whether anything needs to be done differently or tweaked at all. So Pew is going to be helping with this. I have already set up a steering team or task force with several representatives from agencies that'll be overseeing this. And Pew will be doing a technical assistance call with us that all agencies will be invited to. And by the way, this isn't just executive branch or cabinet agencies that will have to do this and fit within this timeline. This will be all agencies. Pew will be doing a couple of technical assistance calls over the next several weeks. They'll be out here tomorrow to work with us and meet with us and set a timeline in the process and help develop what will work best and what won't. And then we'll put information out as to what the timeline is, when calls will be, what technical assistance will be, who the task force or steering team is for who will be working with agencies to do this between now and July 1st, and working through some frequently asked questions as to what these program inventories will need to look like in order for us to be consistent between agencies. So that'll be the first step. The second will be to do some of the next couple steps that are on the timeline for agencies to identify mandatory statutory expenditures and priority for programs, and then also within each program, within an agency, to look at the performance measures that we have, that you all already submit with your budget submission, and look at whether we need to change or tweak those or rework those at all. So again, we're going to have lots of assistance with this, whether from outside resources or our own people within state agencies that'll be set up to answer questions and help everyone walk through this. I don't think this will be a major effort or initiative. I think we do a lot of this already. It's just tweaking what we do and putting it within a certain format so we're all consistent between agencies and developing a system that is what the legislature is looking for based on this piece of legislation. So I think this is like anything. We can all kind of grumble. I can grumble. I think this is not just one more thing I don't need to do. I have enough stuff to do already. What's the legislature thinking? We're doing a lot of this already with our budget submission, or I can choose to embrace this and decide this is something I can do and look at and work with outsiders to help us determine how we can do our work better and set better performance measures and metrics and program inventory measures and performance-based budgeting system that we may not have a good enough system of now. So hope you all would choose to take that latter approach too. There is an example. This may not necessarily be what we will go to or look towards, but on the second page, the Department of Agriculture worked towards, based on legislative requests over the last year, a zero-based budgeting system in which they had to go and do a pretty detailed program inventory of their agency and identify statutory mandatory prioritization of programs, tie the statutory basis to each program. So again, this may not be what we're looking for as we move forward between now and our budget submission in September, but this sets I think a good basis for our steering team to look at and work with Pew as to whether this is the type of format or type of deal that we're looking at. So take a look at this and we'll kind of go from there. So I know there will probably be questions that you all have as we go through this. And we'll have lots of opportunity for you all to ask those questions and seek feedback and make sure we're all clear and on the same page for moving forward. So with that, I'm going to stop and happy to answer. Kind of went longer than I should have. Any questions that you guys have, either about revenue, budgeting, or this process we're going to have moving forward. In the front row. Question for those that can hear, are there any plans to initiate sales tax on those that are non-sales? Not that I've heard. Any other questions? All right, thank you all.
For those of you that are remoting in, the reason you can't see anything on the screen is that we have done a split screen, or we are recording the meeting, and so when the presenter doesn't have a handout, then we're recording them only instead of the screen, and that's why those of you that are remoting in do not see anything. So next on the agenda is John Melbourne, who's the Director of Legislative and Public Affairs, going to do a legislature update. He just walked in the door, so which is good timing for him.
I feel like a pinch hitter just getting called up and go grab a bat and take a swing. No time to prepare. Good morning, everyone. Just kind of give you a rough overview of where things stand. Still a lot to be decided, but then nothing may be decided at all. So just kind of sit back and see what happens with the show. Let's start out. As you all know, the legislature's on recess now until April 27th. They'll come back and they'll finish up their work. The budget committees will probably be back a few days ahead of then, maybe a couple conference committees to do some work on bills that they have in conference. The consensus revenue estimating group meets April 20th. And that's going to be to set the fiscal forecast for the remainder of this current fiscal year through July, and then set the mark for 2017's budget. And as you know, we've been missing the estimates in recent months, and in the last one we were off $1.6 million. I would expect some type of an adjustment that'll be made to estimates going forward. How much It's hard to say. There is some discussion about changing the complexity of the composition of the estimating group to try to get a better sense of what's actually happening out there. There's some view that maybe we're not getting all the right inputs to make those decisions, and they're taking a look at that. We want to hit the mark as close as we can. As I said, there's a lot that still remains in play. Probably the marquee item will be what happens with K-12 funding. The legislature finished its session with a bill that attempts to address the equity portion of the Gannon lawsuit, and that's the portion that deals with how we spend, how we divide the funds up, not so much how much is spent, but is it being equitably distributed among the 286 school districts, trying to equalize from the richest districts as far as property valuation to the lowest. The bill did address some of those needs to kind of close the gap or the range from the high to low. I don't believe it's been signed yet. And once it is, it'll go to the courts and they'll have their review of it, and we'll hear back. The court has said that the state needed to address the equity portion, or school would be in doubt for the coming school year. So we'll see if that's true. We heard that before with Judge Bullock about a decade ago when he ruled on the Montoy case, and they said, well, I really didn't mean that, but take some time and let's get something done. Ended up having a special session, and whether we end up in a special session this year is yet to be seen. Legislators probably don't want to have that because filing deadline for re-election is early June, and any long-running session or change in summer schedules with a special session for a period of time would interrupt that, so I'm sure they want to avoid that as much as possible. They saved a little bit of time by getting done earlier for the first part of the session. May have an extra week or so, which is good or bad news, I guess, for how long the wrap-up will last. It's really kind of a crapshoot. There are those that, like I said, that don't want to be there long. They remember last year's pain, and they don't want to endure that again. But if revenue estimates are low and they need to make adjustments to the budget, they'll need to work on that. There's also whatever reaction they have to make to the K-12 ruling, assuming it happens between now and the end of the month. And then they want to work on the adequacy portion, which is the big spend for K-12. Some estimates as much as $500 million more in revenue to be put into the system. And there are various thoughts on how that'll take place. And it won't be an easy deal. Kind of worked into a lot of that. You all may have heard of the A&M, may have been involved with the A&M studies in some capacity over the past 8-9 months in providing data to the consultants. Legislature has a lot of those recommendations in budget or in bill form in various stages. Nothing at this point is passed. Some has made it out of committee. A lot of it is still in play, and I think revenue estimates will tell you how much they're going to really try to go after some of the lift. There were a few attempts to change the procurement system to bring in K-12 spend, and there's a lot of pushback. That bill was sent back to committee. So while they see the benefit or the potential for savings, I'm not sure that the political will is there to actually do what some say needs to be done. But a poor revenue forecast may change perceptions on what's possible. So I would look for everything to still be in play. As far as what we see in the Department of Administration, Tracy's going to be speaking about procurement a little bit later. That's probably going to be one of the biggest focuses. Whether we have legislation to enact that, I'm not sure. It may be something that comes from an executive order, whether we hire consultants to do it or whether we do it in-house. It's kind of the process for that. And Tracy D will be able to answer questions that you may have on that and what's coming on that. The big theme on that is strategic sourcing and trying to do a better job of purchasing so that we're getting the most bang for the buck, and hopefully it'll open up some competition and drive some prices down and savings for everyone. That's really kind of in a nutshell. We've seen a lot of other bills that deal with other policy that have nothing to do with state government. There's a lot of bills, a lot of legislation in play dealing with reform to the juvenile justice system. We always see things like that. There's some other court and judicial bills in play. That's really been what the session's been about. They did make adjustments early on in a budget bill that took into account the allotments that were made in the last year by the governor. They had some language in there to try to tighten up the STAR bonds process. Those vetoes were not overridden, so the STAR bonds are moving forward. Although I think there'll be some changes in legislation. We'll see how that goes to try to put some better parameters on who gets the STAR bonds and vetting the projects a little better. And I just had one other item. There's another bill that's floating around that would impact the regents in their new public-private partnerships. You may all know KU issued bonds through Wisconsin Development Finance Authority to build a north of $300 million project on campus, kind of where McCollum Hall and down the hill from there. New dorms, new student union, new science building and such. Legislators were upset with the way that all kind of transpired. They passed legislation through the House. It's now in the Senate that would put more oversight on that project, better vetting ahead of time. It also has some restrictions on the functions of the Kansas Development Finance Authority and how they are able to issue bonds or issue new debt, setting some thresholds and some checks and balances in there. And it also affects the Department of Administration in what we're able to do as far as entering in certain types of lease purchase agreements. And that's going to the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and it's got a lot of support, and that's probably going to go through. Big picture doesn't necessarily affect agencies that much, but it will have an impact on the regions and some of their projects they're looking at going forward. With that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer what's going to happen, but I think at this point it's kind of who's going to be in the playoffs in October with Major League Baseball. It's kind of really yet to be decided. I mean, it's late in the year, but it's still early legislatively, I think. So, any questions from anyone? All right. Thank you for listening, and anytime you have any questions, feel free to call me or give me a shout. I'm over in the legislature most daily, or I know what's happening as far as those things go. I can try to provide an answer to what's happening on.
Now that I'm up here, what happened to the bill that was going to disallow fee fund sweeps? I don't know what bill number, sorry.
Well, what it was going to do, or what it may do, is that if you, what happens to, there's a bill that related to fee funds. It's been a practice of the legislature for many years to sweep funds out of fee-funded agencies, take the money, put it in the general fund, and use it for expenditures. One thing they were trying to do to kind of make a poison pill, so that if you sweep the funds, say, take wildlife and parks, so you're going to sweep all of their reserve funds, you would have to go back and notify everybody who ever paid a fee that you took their fund and it was used for this purpose, not for the stated fee purpose that's in statute or reg that the fund's going to go to build boat ramps, or whatever the project may be, or a regulatory board. Originally, it was unclear who was going to be responsible for notifying everyone. Now I think it'll be if you take it from a specific agency, that agency will have the responsibility of notifying people that, which will be interesting. Can you imagine somebody who paid a one-day fisherman comes in to go fishing with his grandkids from Illinois. He has to be notified, and he may have done that 2 or 3 years back, and that fund has been building for from a set point in time. How you notify every individual? Hey, by the way, 75 cents of your fee has now been swept to help take care of this. So it's going to. I understand the intent to try to make it cumbersome and to discourage it, but it doesn't. That it'll have the effect of impacting the agencies and providing more work on them, more time and cost and expense than discouraging legislators. Although I suppose legislators will hear about it, but it doesn't. They're not the ones making the notifications. So that would be one to watch and see if that comes down, because it'll be very difficult to manage, and how far back you go, and if it's do you take a day fisherman or do you take somebody that's had a license and such. So it's hard to say what that's going to do. Yes, ma'am. It's still floating. The question regarding capers, there are a number of bills that are floating around that deal with, been brought up about vacation and sick leave payouts, and the concern about so-called spiking of pensions at the end. Number of different bills that are floating around. Most of them are, or I'd say all of them are originating in the House, in the Appropriations Committee, with a few members who are concerned about that. Mainly, it's the pre-93 folks that seem to would be the ones that would be affected by it more than the current employees, the way the systems have been changed. And it also seems to be going after the problem of one anecdote where a school superintendent somewhere out west had an annuity that paid out when he retired. That was the way it was calculated. He got additional $100,000 or $200,000 added to his final average salary, so he was able to retire at a very, very nice pension because the way it worked out. So there's a lot of instances like that. They have a couple bills that would attempt to fix that would kind of treat those separately. If you have another deferred compensation that's not tied to what the state pays you, but it's set up that way, that they would kind of segregate those, so they couldn't see the large spiking again. Those things have been floating around. Some of the other accrual bills, we've asked Capers, and Capers said we have no idea what they're trying to do. So I think there's a lot of confusion. I think, quite honestly, some of it may have been they gave a courtesy hearing, just to at least air the concerns to be known and get it out there. But I think they also see that there's a lot of problems with doing that. So I don't know that at this point people need to get too worried about anything passing that's going to greatly affect that. But it's certainly something we have to keep watching. And late in the session, anything can happen. But I don't see that they have a lot of traction. And they said Capers is kind of taking the lead and trying to answer the questions and debug that bill to some extent. But they even don't really have an idea of what they're trying to do. The language is pretty rough. So don't plan a trip to Bermuda just yet. Good question, and that's one that keeps coming up because there's a couple of legislators in particular that have this under their saddle, and they raise the question. I'd say the majority of the discussion in Capers in the last few years has been, what can we do to shore up the unfunded liability? And as you know, we issued $1 billion in bonds, and that has helped to raise the unfunded liability, the solvency up from, I want to say from in the 50s, around 2011, 2012, to getting north of 65, 66, 67% fully funded. So the changes that have been made to do that have helped, and we're far ahead of where Illinois and some of these other states that are seeing a lot of problems. We're doing a lot better. So that seemed to be the big focus. Let's worry about the big problem, not the onesies and twosies out there. Anything else? It's still a state office building at this time. We stopped the project to build the new energy center over in the parking lot that's kind of across from the Eisenhower building and behind the old Hayden and modern day Assumption School. Taking a look at perhaps issuing an RFP or going through a process to look at other options for what to do with docking. Regardless of what happens, whether it's a multi-story building or if it's reconfigured to be an energy center or if it's made green space, that property will remain state property. There's no intent to sell the space at all. So that's where that stands. As far as a timeline, later this year, probably before any additional proposals would be sought or considered at this time. So docking will be there for a long time. But in the meantime, we continue to move revenue out. They're occupying the Scott building, which is the old Department of Ed building there on 10th Street. They'll be moving into Mills and moving into the Dillons building down at 29th and Kansas, either now or later this summer. I know the Dillons move probably will start in May or June, and that'll be where the DMV offices will be down there. So they're still working on getting fiber to the facility and getting all the other tenant improvements made. So Well, there's one other provision that's being looked at, and that's, I don't know how many of you deal with state leases for property and such, but there's a discussion of moving all the leasing functions to D of A, into our leasing group with the Office of Facility and Property Management. The idea is that we've demonstrated in recent years that we can save between 3 and 5% on average in renegotiating leases, and with the expertise that we've been able to put to work, they see a possibility for us to capitalize on that and utilize our expertise, and then free up folks in the agencies to do other things. A&M somehow came up with the idea that we have 58 leasing people all across state government, but that may also include one person who signs a lease, or that may be 5% of their job over the course of the year is to deal with leases. They counted that as a full body, so the savings is a little bit overblown in terms of what will happen with a leasing. But we do think that with our expertise in negotiating those leases, we can see some savings for the state. So that's likely to happen, and we've got folks that do a good job with that, and we've been pretty successful. So, anything else? All right. Well, thank you all very much, and hopefully I've given you some words of wisdom, or at least an idea of where things may be going or not going in the next few weeks. So, thank you very much.
Okay. Next step is the reason we moved this meeting from May to April was so he could come in and do his little thing, because we have it in May. All the procurement deadlines for year end have passed, and so I moved it to April just so he could come up and do his little thing. Next up is Tracy Dill, the Director of Procurements. And I don't know if you want, yeah, somewhere this is. Look about it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
This is pretty good.
Yeah. You want to have it on this? We'll do that.
Yeah.
Let's switch over there. That way
Okay.
you're not on camera.
Okay,
I'll be
cool.
close to you.
Yep, I have a face for radio, so not for cameras. Well, good morning. I'm Tracy Deal. I'm the Director of Procurements and Contracts with the Department of Administration. We're going to talk about primarily what's on the screen here, Information Circular 1603. This is the end of year fiscal dates for this year and the beginning of next year. So there's a couple of things in addition. I'm going to, if we have enough time, but I know I'm the last thing between you and a break, so I'll try to go as quickly as possible so you get the maximum break you can have. For those who don't know, SMART will close June 27th at 6 p.m. So when it goes down, it will not reopen again until July 1. That's what all these dates are premised on. I don't know, I won't give up the people who called, but I received 10 phone calls last year on the day after SMART closed asking if I could do something for them in SMART. We're closed too. One agency called me with 3 different people. I guess they kept thinking that if the right person called, I would, give up the ghost and I would do whatever they needed done. So please, I appreciate the fact that you think we have a lot of authority and a lot of power within the system, but we're just like you. When 6 o'clock comes on the 27th, we will be out of the system as well. We may still be closing bids and doing things that don't require any action in SMART for the next 2 or 3 days, the rest of June, or just taking vacation so that you can't get a hold of us. But the fact of the matter is that once the 27th at 6 comes, we'll be done. So these dates should become important to you if you want to get something done for fiscal year 16. First date is you're dealing with, RFPs. You got to have them in by the 18th of April. That will give us enough time to advertise them, get them out on the street, hopefully get negotiations done, contracts awarded, and everything loaded into SMART so that it will be ready when July 1 comes up for your FY16 contract, using FY16 money, if that's what you're trying to get accomplished. If you are after that date, I can't guarantee that your RFP will get done. You'll be taken in the the key, and if we can get to you, we'll get to you, but realize that at a certain point you're going to run out of time. So you need to keep that in mind. There's another thing that works into that we're going to talk about here in a second, hopefully to give you guys some sense of urgency as to getting some things done and not waiting till the last minute. If you're doing a non-RFP that exceeds $50,000, you have a little bit more time. You have till the 21st to get that going. So reach down into your programs, reach down into people you know are working on things that they need something acquired or they need a contract done, and tell them, hey, I need your stuff. Or if you're, in the business office, or let your procurement people know that something's coming, and have them get in touch with us so that we know it's coming, so that we have an idea of what's coming and how we can help you or go from there. If it is less than 50,000, well, you can go clear to May 26th. So you got a lot more time because there's a lot less advertising that's involved when doing that. So the key is 50,000. The key is whether it's an RFP. Now, I have a question I'm going to ask. I've asked this last year. I'm going to ask again. How many of you know what the definition of prior is? By that laughter, I assume that you all know that prior means before, or previous, or something other than after the fact. Prior authorizations mean an authorization before you enter into the contract. So please keep that in mind, because if you have to do prior authorization that $100,000 or more, then you have that date that it has to be in our hands is by June 10th. It has to be, because it has to be posted, has to be worked, has to be reviewed, has to be posted for possible challenge from another vendor, because it's a sole source contract for at least for the 7 days. Again, I realize a lot of people think I'm the almighty and powerful Oz, but that's statutory, and it cannot be waived. So it has to be posted for 7 days. And then once it's done, you still need time to get it awarded and into the SMART system. If you miss that date and it's 100,000 or more, I can't guarantee it's going to get done. Now, there's another factor you need to keep in mind. We post those for a reason. And the reason we post is, by statute, if a vendor challenges that posting and says, hey, you want to give this $180,000 or $1 million contract without bidding it to vendor A, well, I'm vendor B and I can do the same thing, and so I'm telling you there's competition out there. And if someone comes to our office and makes that claim within that 7-day posting period, I have a responsibility to investigate that. So guess what that does? That slows down the process. And if they can provide the service, under the statute, I have an obligation to put it out for bid. Okay? So if you submit it on June 10th, say for example, someone challenges it on June 12th, we review it, we get in touch, we do what we can do, and we decide by June 15th that, yeah, there's someone out there that can bid it, and it's over $150,000, what deadlines have already passed? You're not going to make an FY16 acquisition for that. So you're going to lose that opportunity. So if you know there is something out there that possibly needs to be sole sourced, prior authorization, and it's 100,000 or more, please start working on it now. Don't wait till the last minute, because I can't change the advertising dates on those things. There won't be enough time to get it in, get it out, because we'll be working everybody that's done it and has done the right things as we come forward trying to close that up. So you could lose out, and you need to keep that in mind. Now, if it's under $100,000, you have a little bit more time, and so that deadline is June 20th, because we don't have to post it. We didn't, there still may be competition. We may ask you, why aren't you bidding it? But the fact of the matter is that chances are strong it's going to go through. Now, don't come in, which I've seen some people do on a couple of occasions, and it's a $210,000 acquisition, and so they submit 3 different PAs for $80,000 for the same vendor. That's probably not going to work. I mean, we're not, we weren't born, we can figure that out, do the math and figure it out. So keep that in mind, and please keep those dates in mind, because they do become very, very important and very critical if you want to get something done. And we're not trying to keep you from getting things accomplished, But these things are all statutory, and we're required to comply. And ultimately, if someone challenges it and brings it in, they're not going to be running to you and saying, why did you do that? The first person they're going to go to is me. And they're going to say, why did you allow this to happen? Because my signature is the final thing that goes on those documents. And so I'm the one that's on the hook. And quite frankly, I don't want to be there unless it's something that needs to be accomplished. So any questions about those dates up to this point? Yes, no, maybe? Pretty standard. They're pretty close to last year's dates. You can start doing things for FY17 procurements starting May 2nd. But even if we get them done, you really can't do anything with them until July 1. So if we have to choose between an FY16 and an FY17 procurement, we're going to go with the FY16 procurement to get it done. We'll have yours out there, but it may not get done during the June timeframe, or it may get done right before, depending on how things work out. The last dates I would point to are the major repairs and improvements from the facilities people. Those dates are coming up really quick. They need to be in by April 15th. They set those dates. I go to them. I say, are these dates okay? And they look at what they have going on, and they tell me, because that's based upon their review and the things that they have to get done. So I really don't have a whole lot of flexibility there. I've heard that the facilities people are pretty backed up. So if you have a construction project that needs to be done, needs to get through the review, and needs to be put out on the street for a bid, I would contact them sooner rather than later. You only have 9 days anyway, so I wouldn't wait a whole lot longer to get in touch with them to see where they are and to make sure they know or are aware that what you need to get done can get done. Those are the major dates that I want everybody to be aware of as we move forward, so that you can plan what your agencies are doing and see where those things are. If you don't have the information circular 1603, you can go to our website through the Procurements and Contract website, which is on the Department of Administration website under Procurements and Contracts. Just go under Information Circulars, and you'll find that. The other thing, there was a couple other things I wanted to talk to briefly. We talked about prior authorizations. Please take that into consideration. Prior means, I realize you got to negotiate the contract so you know what the amount is and things like that, but don't sign the contract until you get authorization to do it, because if we don't give you authorization, you've potentially obligated the state to a lawsuit. You may have to pay to get out of it. You may still have to bid it, because remember, technically, under the statutes, anything over $5,000 is supposed to be bid unless it fits into a category. I think we talked about them last year. I get a lot of codes for only known provider, and it turns out it's the only known provider I want to do business with. That's not an exception. And if I can Google it and I can find more than one, that tells you that there's competition out there. And just as a matter of information, when you're putting a sole source together, probably one of the things you don't want to say is that we've done a lot of research and we've found there's a lot of people out there that can provide this service, but we want to go with this one guy. Obviously, the people that are giggling sort of figured out there's obviously a lot of competition out there. John brought up one thing that I wanted to touch briefly, and that was the Alvarez and Marcel things that are out there. There was a lot of stuff about procurement, and if you deal with procurement on a daily basis and you read it, you get there's one overriding theme, and that is that the state, as John alluded to, their view is we're not getting the best bang for the buck, and so the word strategic sourcing comes up a lot. Strategic sourcing is essentially a beginning to end way of doing business that is analysis and data driven. A lot of times, especially in the prior authorization field, we do a lot of state agency contracts because the agency says, well, we need to have this and we're the only one that needs it, when in reality, you really aren't. There's other agencies that probably could use that service, and so I can tell you that we're looking more and more for statewide applicability. So even though you come to us and say, well, we need this service, either as a prior authorization or we need to do a bid only for this, we're probably going to be looking at trying to bring in other agencies or seeing if we can make it a statewide contract, because there's no reason to have 5 or 6 different contracts for the same thing. Because once we do that and we split our spend, which strategic sourcing talks about, aggregate your spend, drive down the price point, get a better deal. That's basically what Alvarez and Marsal is saying, is that we don't do that. We don't do it enough. Part of that, though, is that we depend upon you and the agencies to do your specifications, to decide what you're going to do, because we're not involved in that discussion. In a strategic sourcing model, we would be involved in those discussions. Someone with a procurement knowledge or whatever would be meeting with or be involved in those initial discussions to try to help you plan out things. You know, we had an agency not long ago call us up and wanted to do a certain type of minor construction project in their where they're located, and they said to us, "Hey, you know, we've got X, and they can come in and they can start on Monday." And this was like a Thursday, and we need to do it. And we said, "Well, how long have you been thinking about it?" "Oh, we've been thinking about it since probably around Thanksgiving." And this was like middle of January, and I was like, "Well, why didn't you put it out for bid?" "Well, we had Thanksgiving, then we had Christmas, then we had New Year's." And I said, "Yeah, but if you'd sent in the specs, we could have had it out for bid." The problem with what goes on there is that we denied the prior authorization. We put it out for bid, but we still have a problem. And the problem is they still wanted it done in such a short time frame that they essentially cut out most of the competition. And it just so happened that who they wanted to use was one of the higher charging entities, vendors that we've dealt with before. We've dealt with them before. They're usually high. They don't get many bids because they're always high, unless they're forced to compete. And then that drives down their price. When we don't plan, and that's what strategic sourcing discusses or wants, when you don't plan ahead and you don't set things in motion, what essentially happens is that you start to limit your competition, and thus you limit your ability to bargain, get a better price, or drive the price point down. And that essentially is what the legislature and the efficiency study talks a lot about. They talk about that, and also in net discounts for paying early. I'll be honest, so many vendors call me about you guys wanting me to help them get paid. I don't know how we pay before 30 days. They say we pay way before 30 days. I don't know how that happens. Because I get a call at least 1 or 2 a week saying, "Hey, can you contact X agency? We haven't been paid in 60 days. So I don't know where that's coming from. So be that as it may, the fact of the matter is that that's what strategic sourcing is really about. Planning, procuring, and then managing your vendors on the backside. And having one whole process that allows you to do that. And so on the backside, you keep your vendors happy. They don't believe they're getting messed over, so you've got a better relationship. You keep your prices down, and that's sort of how it works. A lot of states use it in some form or another. We try to do it, but we just have a different model because we depend upon the first and the third part of it really rests down with the agencies, because if you don't tell us that you're having a problem with a vendor, we really can't go help you. I know I've talked with many agencies about vendor problems, and if I call, usually it gets resolved, because the last thing they want to hear is from me, because once I call and say, "Well, we're going to have to cancel your contract unless we can get this resolved," the next answer usually is, "Oh, we'll take care of that." But I usually don't want to get involved unless and until it has to be done, because if I shoot that bullet too many times, they'll learn that, "Oh, well, we don't need to worry about it." Any questions about? I can tell you more about the efficiency studies, at least what I won't tell you what I think, but I can tell you at least what was discussed, at least in open meetings in front of the legislature. I spent, I think, 2.5 weeks almost every day talking to them about procurement. So, no questions? Okay. Last thing I would bring up, we've gotten a lot of calls lately. There must have been some sort of document or something. People went to a conference or something. I'm not sure which. And the term RFI, request for information, seems to be prevalent in the agencies right now. Don't know why, but I wanted to just take a moment and explain to you why when you call us and you say, "We want to do an RFI for this," we are going to probably say no. An RFI is really an RFP without awarding the contract. Same amount of work, same amount of everything, but that's not really the most important part of it. The most important part of it from an RFI is that since it's not a contract that can be awarded, there's no awarding of a contract, the information that's received by us through the RFI becomes open record immediately. So if a smart vendor who knows he has a good product is probably not going to respond to your RFI because he doesn't need to. The ones that are going to respond to you probably are the ones that are new or hoping against hope that you'll make the mistake of saying, well, let's just award through the RFI, which you can't do. And so all that information becomes available. So when it comes time for us to negotiate, if we do put it out for an RFP, all that information's out there. When we go to different, so you basically are allowing people a free shot at information which you really don't want to have out there. Because when we do an RFP, we don't make anything open record until we execute the contract. So we hold everything. And we basically say once the contract is awarded and signed, then the information that we have will be released. But if we're given an RFI, we get it in, and then we turn right around and do an RFP, which is basically the same specifications. Now the guys that didn't bid before, they're calling up saying, we want your RFI information. And so now they know who put in before. They know where those price points were. They know what their price point is. And so if they thought they needed to have a lower price and they saw, well, our competition is really up here, we can raise our price. So guess what? We don't necessarily get the best deal anymore. And it becomes harder for us to drive that price down through negotiations. So that's the main reason we don't do RFIs. It basically does not do us any good as a state to do it. Now, the question becomes, well, how do I find out what's going on out there? Most of the time, I think most of your program people know the vendors that are out there or know what's going on. There are times for RFIs to be used, and some states use them, and they have rules to protect the information being disclosed. We don't necessarily have those rules. So when you get into it, and you can talk to any vendor you want as long as we are not involved in the procurement at that point. So if you haven't submitted a requisition through SMART or anything like that, you can call up, you can have people come in, you can, if they want to come talk to you, if they want to make presentations to you, leave information for you to look at, you can do that. That's not ours. We won't release it because we don't have it. Whether it's open record or not would really depend upon your legal staff or whomever if someone made a request, but it's not an open meeting. It's research you're performing, and it's not in response to a procurement. So you can find out whatever you want, get whatever you want, and make your decisions accordingly. Just leave us out of it. And so that's what I would recommend for you to do is to look up things and do your own research and have people come in and talk to you or into your programs or whatever and give them the insight that they think they need in order to put specifications together. However, that being said, don't let a vendor write specifications for you. Or if you do, don't leave the name of their merchandise in the specification. And believe it or not, people do it all the time. And we get it, and we know right then and there, we know which vendor they're looking at, we know which vendor they want, and that could create some problems. But we're going to change that spec, and we're going to make it more generic. That being said, any questions about RFIs, anything like that? You guys just want me to stop so you can have your break? No questions? All right, those are the only things I really wanted to touch base with. Again, look at Information Circular 1603. Please try to, those dates are pretty solid, especially the 100,000 PAs, and remember prior means before. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I just told Tracy that's why I always put him before break, because then nobody has questions because you're all wanting break. And so we have back there, we're getting ready to take a break. Those are actually small cinnamon rolls. So I don't know how big the large ones would have been, but those are their small cinnamon rolls. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. So that puts us back at 10:15, 10:16, somewhere around in there. So coffee, scones, and there are different kinds of scones, but I don't know what kinds they are. So have to try them out and see. So we'll be back in 15.